Coming up on this episode.
We can tend to read a lot on social media around leaders are empowering and motivating and compassionate, and managers are directive and micromanaging and disempowering. Well, it's wrong. It's giving management a bad name and it's promoting leadership. Leadership creates followership. I want to say that again because it's a really important point to sort of think about when you're ultimately thinking about what leadership is and how people demonstrate it. So this notion of leaders versus managers, and leaders are one thing and managers are another, is utter rubbish. And we have to stop it. We have to stop this giving management a bad name and promoting leadership.
Welcome to the People Performance Podcast. The People Performance Podcast is made up of 3 series. First up, we have the Leader Lounge episodes with founder of T2, Martin Johnson. Then we have the guest interview episodes. And finally, we have our performance episodes delivered by our very own T2 consultants. For now, sit back, tune in and enjoy the People Performance Podcast.
So welcome back to the People Performance Podcast with me, Martin Johnson, and another Leader Lounge episode where we talk about a subject matter for about 10 to 15 minutes. This week, I'm going to talk about leadership versus management, or not so much leadership versus management, leadership and management. And I want to debunk a few myths, and I want to try and explore a little bit around what we see and hear out there around this concept of leaders versus managers and leadership versus management, and why it shouldn't be a either or. They are 2 different skill sets that all people in positions of command, authority and rank need to deploy. They are 2 different skill sets. And so I think the first thing to mention on this is we can tend to read a lot on social media around leaders are empowering and motivating and compassionate, and managers are directive and micromanaging and disempowering. Well, it's wrong. It's giving management a bad name and it's promoting leadership. And I don't understand why we're going down this road, because leadership and management are 2 different things, and they're both essential for any person in a position of command, authority, rank or influence, or anybody in any walk of life or team. They are 2 things that we must learn the differences between, and we must learn to deploy situationally in the right context. So what I want to do for this quick Leader Lounge episode is I want to just explore what the differences are and why they're both essential and in what context they are. So leadership, let's start with leadership. And I've just made sure that we can define these things for clarity. Leadership is the act of influence and direction. It occurs when a group of people want to follow and replicate the actions, attitudes, and behaviors of influential others. So if you think about that as a definition, leadership creates followership. I'm going to say that again because it's a really important point to sort of think about when you're ultimately thinking about what leadership is and how people demonstrate it. Leadership is where we have followership. So if we are displaying the qualities of leadership, generally people buy in, engage, and want to follow and replicate whatever actions, attitudes, and behaviors that particular individual is showing. So it's this leadership is the art of galvanizing a group of people, bringing something alive in the mind of another, so much so that they want to get behind it and go in the same direction. And that truly is leadership. So what's management? Well, let's look at defining what we mean by management. Management is the act of ensuring that processes, tasks, and activities are completed. It occurs when resources need allocating, problems need resolving, and deadlines need meeting. So you can see the subtle shift between the leadership skill set and the management skill set. If leadership is about being visionary and storytelling and engaging and inspiring and therefore creating followership behind an endeavor, well, management is the process of going, well, when it comes to execution, planning, activities and tasks in order to make that a reality, management says that I'm going to measure and monitor, which we'll come back to shortly. I'm going to measure and monitor the progress we are making. And that requires a different set of skill sets. So this notion of leaders versus managers, and leaders are one thing and managers are another, is utter rubbish. And we have to stop it. We have to stop this giving management a bad name and promoting leadership, or promoting some of the qualities that are more humanistic, caring, compassionate, and sound great from a humanism perspective, and almost then vilifying anything that's remotely assertive or that commands compliance or that checks and verifies on progress, and label it as micromanaging or dictatorial. We've got to stop this. Leadership and management go hand in hand, and anybody in a position of command, authority, rank, or influence need to be able to deliver both in order to succeed in any endeavour. So, we've got to stop with the either or statements of leaders are this, management is this. And we've got to understand that both are incredibly important. For example, let's just explore a little bit around how the interplay between leadership and management works on a daily and weekly basis for many. And we'll look at this in the context of an organisation or a team. So regardless of what your position is, for example, if you was showing leadership, you would be very visionary. So visionary means I'm going to visualize a future outcome. I'm going to establish clarity on where it is we are going, that flag on the hill or the outcome we're trying to achieve. So that takes a very specific communication style from an individual to the collective. You know, if we're going to sell the dream or we're going to bring alive what it is we're trying to achieve and where we're going, then that is vision, and that is a visionary communication style. That would very much come under leadership. It's a leadership skill set and quality we need to be able to provide clarity and bring something alive in the mind of another. However, once we've done that, the interplay is we've then got to transition into management at times, which is how do we ensure the execution of what needs to be done happens so we can achieve that vision, we can arrive at our destination. So the interplay between leadership and management skill sets, as an example, is we might need to show more leadership to get people in a space to get there, but we're absolutely going to have to flip into the management qualities to be able to deliver the execution. For example, in organizations as well, we experience a lot of change in our environment, more so in the modern day world than we ever have, with the emergence of technology and AI and societal shift and generations coming into the workplace. There's a lot happening in the world which is fast-paced. So change is all around us and inevitable. So change and communicating change and anticipating change is a leadership quality. You know, we need to be able to communicate with people what's changing, why it's changing, and what we have to do to be able to pivot and move, and why it's going to benefit us all if we achieve this. But then when it comes to managing that change, you've got the planning process, you've got resourcing. That's much more of a management skill set where we have to get more into the detail around how we're going to achieve this, who's going to do what, the timeframes in which we need to get there, and the standards which we require to deliver. And the same can be said for decision making. Sometimes decision making comes under the leadership banner. You know, if we're going to make decisions on where we are heading or what we are going to do, then that very much requires some of the leadership qualities. Executing and planning and applying resources to those decisions is very much a management capability. So in any role, people need to understand and learn the distinction between leadership and management, and be able to situationally shift between the two based on the context. That's really important to understand. We need to learn the distinction between leadership and management. But most importantly, and situationally, we need to understand which one we apply in any given context. The final thing I'm going to mention on this for this short Leader Lounge episode is this notion of leadership, and the leadership skill set is very supportive and humanistic. and the management aspects tend to be more assertive. Well, that's wrong too. If you think about this, in either the leadership skill set or the management skill set, any individual can be either supportive or assertive or a balance of the two. You know, it's not leadership is all the nice things and management is all the uncomfortable things. You can show leadership. You can be creating a vision and communicating a vision and trying to bring people in a direction. And you can do that in a very supportive, listening, collaborative, two-way, exploratory style. Or you can do it in an incredibly assertive, directive, and clear style. And again, it's situational and it's down to the natural personality and persona of the individual. But if you do it well, both can equally be as effective. You can be very clear and saying, look, this is the vision. This is where we're going. This is what's in it for us. And I need you all behind me. And be more assertive and absolutely still show great leadership. Or you can include the masses in the group. You can seek input. You can collaborate two ways. You can win hearts and minds. You can drive personal ownership and contribution into the vision in a more supportive way and still achieve a desired outcome. And the same goes for the management aspects when it comes to managing process, tasks and activities and checking and verifying. I love that word. Checking and verifying that we are on task and that things are being done and people are being accountable to deliver what we need. You can do that in a very assertive, clear way. And you can also do it in a very collaborative, coaching, supportive way. So when it comes to the leadership skill set and the management skill set, one is neither assertive and one is neither supportive. You can apply both of those styles in either the leadership bucket or the management bucket. And I think that's another myth that we have to debunk when it comes to the leadership versus management conversation. So remember, let's try to, in this short episode, let's try to just go away with one or two things and get you thinking about the concepts of leadership and management. Leadership is ultimately about followership. And some of the leadership qualities we teach here at T2 and when we do our leadership workshops and programs with clients is if you start looking at leadership, it's about how do we create followership from individuals or a group of people? How do we bring something alive, a direction of travel, a flag on the hill? And how do we galvanize people behind that so we're all heading in the same direction? How do we create engagement? How do we create an inclusive culture? How do we foster positive behaviors in the team or in the group or in the environment? What are we willing to accept? What are we willing to not accept? That's all in the leadership space, because then if we can create the followership required to deliver an outcome, the rest takes care of itself. But management is very much around the planning and the execution of that vision. It's very much around the details around how we are going to do it. And it's also about taking the responsibility to check and verify that we are on task, that we are on track, and that things are being done. And the two are absolutely essential for any individual who is trying to achieve any endeavor to situationally apply in any given context. The final thing I'll say on this is some people say they have a very rigid view of leadership and management, and they do it structurally and hierarchically. So they'll say, if you're in the C-suite in an organization, you should be showing leadership. You shouldn't be getting involved in any of the management aspects. You should be the visionaries, the strategists, the people at the top of a team or organization who is setting the clarity, setting the direction, and remaining in that leadership space. And as you come down into the layers of management in an organization, then the mid-manager should be managing the process, tasks and activities and checking and verifying and finger on the pulse and driving performance. And I don't think it's as clear as cut or as binary as that. I think my experience of working with teams across the board, whether it's organizations, public sector, elite sports teams, is everybody through a spine of a hierarchical structure, in some sense, at certain times, have to straddle leadership and management. And an example of that would be, even if you're in the C-suite and you're setting absolute clear directions and you've got a really good management team underneath you, yes, you should be doing less of the management skill set. You should be getting involved less in the management of the plan, the resourcing, and the execution. But that's impossible to say that across the board you're never going to get involved, because ultimately you still got to apply the management skill set to your direct reports. You still got to check and verify that what's happening underneath you is going to deliver the outcome. And so at certain times, even C-suite leaders, yes, you got to be highly visionary and you got to stay strategic, and absolutely your job is to direct us and give clarity on where we are heading. But you also have to be managers at times and manage process tasks and activities and check and verify. And that should happen all the way through. I guess the level of which you're applying leadership and management will change as you go through the spine of an organization. But it shouldn't be that these people just lead and these people just manage. As I've explained on this Leader Lounge episode, all people in positions of command, authority, or rank need to know the distinction between the two and need to know the situations where I need to apply either leadership or management in the context. So hopefully that has been useful. And if you're listening to this, I'd like you to reflect a little bit on the position you have in your given team or environment right now. Which of the two skill sets you are applying more naturally than the other one? I speak to so many leaders where they feel like they're managing 99% of the time and they don't get a chance to lead as much as they want. I get the situations where people are remaining in the leadership bucket when actually they should be rolling up their sleeves and looking from a management perspective and checking and verifying a little bit more in order to drive accountability and results. But all people need to understand the differences and the distinctions between the two, and when situationally you need to apply either leadership or management. So think about that. I'd love to answer any questions if you want to pop them in the comments. As always, feel free to put your input and your views in there, and maybe we'll come back and sort of touch upon this a little bit more. But don't believe everything you read. Don't jump on the leadership bandwagon and give management a bad name. We need the two. The two are really important to performance and performance environments. We just need to define them better, understand the differences between the two, and learn the skill sets to apply them each equally, individually, and in the right context. So that's all for this Leader Lounge episode, and I'll be back shortly with another People Performance podcast.
The People Performance Podcast, brought to you by T2,